In the heart of a remote village nestled deep within the misty woods, whispers of an ancient evil echoed through the cobblestone streets. The townsfolk dared not speak its name aloud, for fear that it might awaken from its centuries-long slumber. Yet, despite their silent prayers and superstitions, the darkness that lurked in the shadows refused to be ignored. Legend had it that the village was cursed by the presence of vampires, creatures of the night whose insatiable thirst for blood knew no bounds. These undead beings, once human, now roamed the earth in search of their next victim, their crimson eyes gleaming with an unholy hunger. Among the villagers, there was one tale that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls, a tale of a vampire lord who ruled over the land with an iron fist, his reign of terror and challenge for centuries. They said he dwelled in the depths of the ancient castle that loomed ominously on the outskirts of the village, its crumbling walls a testament to the darkness that dwelled within. As the moon cast its eerie glow upon the sleepy village, a sense of dread hung heavy in the air. Children huddled close to their mothers, their wide eyes darting nervously at the slightest sound. The elderly muttered incantations under their breath, seeking protection from the malevolent spirits that prowled the night. But despite their best efforts, the village could not escape the clutches of the undead. Each night, as the world plunged into darkness, the streets grew silent, save for the sound of soft footsteps treading softly upon the cobblestones. And with each passing day, the whispers grew louder, the shadows lengthening as the vampire lord's grip tightened around the village like a noose. It was said that those who crossed his path were doomed to suffer a fate worse than death itself, their bodies drained of blood, their souls condemned to wander the earth for all eternity, trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment and despair. But there was one among them who refused to cower in fear, a young woman named Elena, whose fiery spirit burned brighter than the sun itself. With her heart set ablaze by the flames of defiance, she vowed to rid her village of the vampire lord's tyranny once and for all. Armed with nothing but her wits and courage, Elena ventured into the heart of darkness, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls of the ancient castle. With each step she took, the air grew colder, the darkness closing in around her like a suffocating blanket. But she pressed on, her determination unwavering in the face of unspeakable evil. And as she reached the inner sanctum of the castle, she came face to face with the vampire lord himself, his eyes burning with a hunger that sent shivers down her spine. Yet, despite the fear that threatened to consume her, Elena stood her ground, her gaze unwavering as she confronted the creature before her. For she knew that only by facing her fears head-on could she ever hope to banish the darkness that threatened to consume her village. But what fate awaits Elena in the heart of the vampire lord's lair? Will she emerge victorious, her village freed from the clutches of the undead? Or will she become yet another victim of the darkness that lurks in the shadows, condemned to join the ranks of the undead for all eternity? Only time will tell, as the battle between light and darkness rages on, its outcome uncertain until the very end. As Elena stood face to face with the vampire lord, a tense silence enveloped the chamber, broken only by the faint sound of her pounding heart. The air crackled with an electric intensity, the weight of centuries of darkness bearing down upon her shoulders. For a moment, neither spoke, each locked in a silent battle of wills that threatened to consume them both. But then, with a voice as cold as the grave, the vampire lord spoke, his words dripping with malice. "So, mortal," he hissed, his eyes narrowing into slits as he regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "What brings you to my domain? Do you seek to challenge me, little human? Do you dare to defy the will of one who has walked this earth for centuries beyond counting?" Elena stood her ground, her jaw set in a defiant line as she met the vampire lord's gaze head-on. "I have come to put an end to your reign of terror," she declared, her voice steady despite the tremble in her limbs. "The people of this village deserve to live free from fear, and I will stop at nothing to ensure that they do." A cold, humorless laugh echoed through the chamber, sending shivers down Elena's spine. "Foolish mortal," the vampire lord sneered, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Do you truly believe that you can defeat me? I am eternal, unstoppable. Your pitiful attempts to defy me are nothing more than a fleeting dream, destined to be crushed beneath the weight of my power." But Elena refused to be intimidated, her resolve burning brighter than ever as she faced down the ancient evil before her. With a flick of her wrist, she produced a gleaming silver dagger from the folds of her cloak, its blade shimmering in the dim light of the chamber. "I may be but a mere mortal," she said, her voice ringing with determination, but I am not alone. The strength of my convictions, the love I bear for my people, it is more powerful than any darkness you could ever hope to wield. And with this blade, I will vanquish you, once and for all." With a roar of fury, the vampire lord lunged forward, his fangs bared in a savage snarl. But Elena was ready, her movements swift and sure as she met his attack head-on. The clang of steel echoed through the chamber as blade met fang, each strike sending sparks flying into the air. But even as they battled, Elena could feel the darkness closing in around her, threatening to swallow her whole. With each passing moment, the vampire lord's strength seemed to grow, his attacks becoming more ferocious with every blow. Yet, despite the odds stacked against her, Elena refused to falter. With a cry of defiance, she lunged forward, her blade finding its mark as it pierced the vampire lord's heart. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the ancient creature staggered backward, his eyes wide with shock. And then, with a final, anguished scream, the vampire lord crumbled to dust, his form dissipating into the ether like smoke on the wind. The chamber fell silent once more, the echoes of their battle fading into the darkness as Elena stood alone, victorious at last. But as she surveyed the scene before her, a sense of unease settled in the pit of her stomach. For she knew that the battle was far from over, that the darkness that had plagued her village for so long would not be so easily vanquished. As she turned to leave the chamber, a whisper of movement caught her ear, a soft rustle of fabric, the faintest hint of a shadow lurking in the corner of her vision. With a start, Elena realized that she was not alone, that somewhere, in the depths of the castle, another evil lurked, waiting to take its place at the head of the vampire lord's dark empire. And so, with her blade held high and her spirit burning bright, Elena vowed to continue the fight, to rid her village of the darkness that threatened to consume it once and for all. For though the battle may be long and fraught with peril, she knew that as long as there was light in her heart, the darkness would never triumph. As Elena made her way through the labyrinthine corridors of the ancient castle, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at her insides. The darkness seemed to press in around her, thick and suffocating, as if the very walls of the castle itself were alive with malevolent intent. With each step she took, the air grew colder, the shadows dancing tauntingly at the edge of her vision. But Elena refused to be deterred, her determination unwavering as she pressed forward into the heart of the darkness. As she rounded a corner, she stumbled upon a chamber unlike any she had seen before. The walls were adorned with ancient tapestries, their faded threads depicting scenes of unspeakable horror. In the center of the room stood an ornate sarcophagus, its lid adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and twist in the flickering torchlight. Elena approached cautiously, her senses on high alert as she studied the sarcophagus before her. Something about it felt wrong, as if a great evil lay dormant within, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With a trembling hand, she reached out and pushed open the lid, revealing the darkness that lurked within. But to her surprise, the sarcophagus was empty, its contents long since vanished into the mists of time. A sense of foreboding washed over Elena as she surveyed the chamber, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. She knew that she was not alone, that somewhere, lurking in the shadows, the true mastermind behind the vampire lord's reign of terror awaited her arrival. But try as she might, Elena could find no trace of the elusive presence that seemed to taunt her from the darkness. With a frustrated sigh, she turned to leave the chamber, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. As she stepped out into the corridor once more, a sudden chill ran down her spine, a whisper of movement, the soft tread of footsteps echoing through the empty halls. With a start, Elena whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for her blade. But there was nothing there, save for the oppressive darkness that seemed to swallow her whole. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Elena realized that she was being watched, that the true mastermind behind the vampire lord's reign of terror was closer than she had ever dared to imagine. And so, with her senses on high alert and her blade held at the ready, Elena prepared herself for the battle that lay ahead. For though the darkness may have claimed victory this day, she knew that as long as there was breath in her body, she would never stop fighting to protect those she loved from the horrors that lurked in the shadows. As Elena ventured deeper into the bowels of the ancient castle, the sense of impending doom only grew stronger. Every shadow seemed to writhe with unseen malice, and every creak of the old stone echoed like a sinister whisper in her ears. Yet, fueled by her determination to rid her village of the darkness that plagued it, she pressed on. Her footsteps echoed through the deserted corridors, each one a reminder of the eerie silence that enveloped the castle like a shroud. But just as she began to doubt her own senses, a faint glimmer of light caught her eye, a flickering torch at the end of the hallway, its warm glow beckoning her forward. With cautious steps, Elena made her way toward the light, her heart pounding in her chest. As she drew closer, she could hear the sound of voices, a low, guttural murmur that sent a chill down her spine. Steeling herself for whatever lay ahead, she rounded the final corner and stepped into the chamber beyond. What she found there took her breath away. A vast, cavernous hall, its walls lined with rows upon rows of ancient tomes and arcade artifacts. At the center of the room stood a figure cloaked in shadow, their features obscured by the darkness that surrounded them. "Who are you?" Elena demanded, her voice echoing through the chamber like a thunderclap. "What do you want with this village?" The figure stepped forward into the light, revealing themselves to be a tall, imposing figure clad in robes of midnight black. Their eyes burned with a cold, unnatural light, and a cruel smile played at the corners of their lips. "I am but a humble servant of the darkness," the figure replied, their voice dripping with malice. "And as for what I want, well, let's just say that this village holds a special place in my heart. It would be a shame to see it go to waste." Elena's blood ran cold at the figure's words, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. Who was this mysterious stranger, and what dark purpose drove them to torment her village so? But before she could voice her questions, the figure raised a hand, and a wave of darkness surged forth, enveloping Elena in its icy embrace. With a cry of despair, she fell to her knees, her strength draining away like water through a sieve. And as the darkness closed in around her, Elena knew that she was facing a foe unlike any she had ever encountered before, a foe whose power knew no bounds, and whose thirst for destruction threatened to consume everything she held dear. But even as her vision faded to black and her consciousness slipped away, a spark of defiance burned bright within her heart. For though the darkness may have claimed victory this day, Elena vowed that she would never stop fighting, no matter the cost. And with that vow echoing in her mind, she surrendered to the darkness, knowing that the battle was far from over. As Elena lay trapped in the grip of darkness, her mind clouded with despair, she felt a flicker of warmth stir within her heart. It was a small spark, barely noticeable amidst the overwhelming blackness that surrounded her, but it was enough to reignite the flames of her resolve. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Elena fought against the suffocating grip of the darkness, pushing back against the despair that threatened to consume her. And slowly, ever so slowly, she felt the shadows begin to recede, their hold loosening with each passing moment. With a gasp, Elena opened her eyes, blinking away the remnants of the darkness that had clouded her vision. Before her stood the mysterious figure, their eyes widened in shock at her defiance. "How? How is this possible?" they stammered, their voice tinged with disbelief. Elena rose to her feet, her spirit burning bright with newfound determination. "You may be powerful," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her limbs, "but you underestimate the strength of the human spirit. We may be fragile, but we are also resilient. And as long as there is hope in our hearts, we will never stop fighting against the darkness." With a roar of fury, the figure lashed out with a wave of darkness, but Elena was ready. With a swift movement, she raised her blade, the silver glinting in the dim light of the chamber as it cut through the shadows like a beacon of hope. The darkness recoiled before her, its tendrils shrinking back in defeat. With a final, anguished cry, the figure vanished into the ether, leaving behind nothing but a faint whisper on the wind. And as the shadows dispersed, Elena knew that she had emerged victorious. The village was safe once more, free from the clutches of the darkness that had plagued it for so long. In the days that followed, the villagers rejoiced, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they were no longer alone in their struggle. And though the memory of the darkness would linger for years to come, they knew that as long as they stood together, they would always triumph over adversity. As for Elena, she knew that her journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new battles to fight. But with the strength of her convictions and the love of her people by her side, she was ready to face whatever darkness the future might hold. And so, with her head held high and her heart full of hope, Elena set out into the world once more, knowing that no matter what trials lay ahead, she would face them with courage and determination, secure in the knowledge that the light would always prevail in the end.